with a big stand like Stone Cold with a few beers. Play the game, I end the game, I'm champion, I'm Triple H. Undertaker, I'm your maker, bury the brother like Kane. Ooh, 1-3, hit the tombstone, hit the choke slam on face. Ooh, yeah, like a macho, heel turn like a muscle. If you sell a lot of tomatoes, I'ma keep a couple models. Ooh, and you may call me HBK. When I'm tuning up the vein, you best be getting in my way. Ooh, yeah, I'm degenerate, I love it, yes, I love it. If you wait down with that, then I got two is for you suck it. Too sweet, put your fangs up. Too sweet, hold another cup. Let's be busy, 23, got me feeling way too sweet. Ooh.
Welcome everyone to your longest running Australian wrestling podcast, Wrestle Radio Australia. I'm your host, Lachlan Albert. Do not adjust your set. That's right. I have taken over Todd's position for the podcast this week, and I hope you all went out and enjoyed local pro wrestling this past weekend. If you didn't, that is okay, because there was a chance to do so on YouTube. I know PWA had We're Gonna Need a Montage, their Academy showcase, which was on the 13th, free on YouTube, an awesome show that showed some of the young guys coming up. But around the country, we are opening up. We are getting opportunities to see wrestling again. So please go out, support your local promotions and see what great shows they're putting on. The reason that I am here running this podcast today is because I have the pleasure of doing Making Chicken Salad, a Wrestle Radio Australia podcast with Todd every week. And off mic, we were just having a chat, and I realized that he really is one of the most knowledgeable, such an experienced person in the realm of Australian pro wrestling. And he does such a good job hosting this podcast, but we never get the opportunity to hear his side of the story. So I've told him that I will be hijacking the feed this week, and instead of him just being the host, he gets to be the star of the show for once. So we'll get to talking to Todd and seeing what he has to say about his time in wrestling right after this.
December 3rd, Max Watts. PWA returns home. Now We Conquer live, December 3rd, live on Fight.
This is the Bro Day Pod. Apparently, he had two stipulations. One, it was an all or nothing in terms of accepting it. Either all of them accept it or none of them accept it.
Oh, dude.
So if there's anyone, so he told them all, look, you either all have to accept it or you all don't accept it. So if there's someone like, no, I don't want it, you then, if you're one of the 14 that's like, no, it's okay, you don't have to, you're my friend, don't buy this for me, don't give me $1 million, but then you look at the other 30 and you're like, well, I can't do it to them, so okay, I'll accept. It ran along those lines, right?
Imagine that
Big
one
power play.
Imagine if there's one dude that's like,
Nah, don't care.
Guys, we can't do it to George.
I know,
we
right?
love George. Take these.
Right.
I would be like, I will punch you. I will slaughter you now.
What? I don't care. I will kill you. Right? You don't want the $1 million? Fine. I'll have
dead
two.
set. He's about to have 13 friends. I swear to God.
Follow Bro Day No Plan B podcast on Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get your podcasts.
I'm here with Todd Eastman. Todd, how does it feel to be on the other side of the mic for once?
Yeah, this is weird. I don't like not having control right now. I don't have a run sheet. I don't really think of questions anyway. So that part's fine. But this is very much like you've got my baby right now.
I know I do. And I'm going to shake that baby up. So, Todd, I want to know, because if there are plenty of people who are listeners to Wrestle Radio Australia who know you as the person who comes on every week, who does interviews. Sometimes you mention that you're working in wrestling here in Queensland, but I want to get a sense of where you are in the Australian wrestling landscape. So can you give us a brief background on what you've done in the past and kind of where you are now in your wrestling career?
Started out wanting to be a wrestler. So then I was very late doing it. I was like 35 when I started training. So I was very late doing it. Worked out that I was 35 and I was very late doing it. So I couldn't, my body just wasn't going to let me.
That would have been back in about 1806, right?
That's exactly right. It's about 10 years ago, if we're being honest. So I realized that my body just wasn't going to, because I just kept getting stupid little niggly injuries all the time, like hammies and all of that sort of stuff. And it was just the point where I knew unfortunately, as much as I love wrestling, I was never going to be able to be a full-time wrestler. So it was very, very hard for me to tell Chris Basso that I just don't think, because no one wants to admit defeat, especially when you're in a family like I was at RC Dub. Everyone's very supportive of each other, but I knew my limitations. I knew what was going on. Like I tore my bicep getting out of a ring once because two guys had hit the ropes. So I tore, like, if you see, I don't know if you can see it, but it's extremely
nice
torn. Yeah, it's very not cool. So I sort of knew. I knew that wasn't going to happen for me. But it was Chris. It was like, well, why don't you do? Well, I was already doing commentary, but it was like, why don't you just do that? And you can keep. We don't want to lose you because we like you, which is something I don't usually hear. But it's but yeah, they just kept me around, and then like fell into helping book at RCW for a while until I think that was for about 2 years, until my wife got a transfer in her work up here to Queensland. So I moved up here and fell into working with AWA at the time. Then I started helping book there, and then with Venom Pro Wrestling started helping book there. At one point, it was both companies I was helping book at the same time, which was a bit hard. But yeah, that and just managing is pretty much, yeah. I don't know what, like, yeah.
I want to talk about the managing
describe.
side of it because,
Yes.
you know, from a fan's perspective, that's the way I think of Todd Eastman is as a manager. The person that I've seen you manage the most is Jake Nova up here in Queensland, but I know you've managed some big names in the past. Who was the first person that you managed?
First guy I actually managed on shows was Adam Brooks. That
Wow,
was my
big
first
name to get straight in.
I know, well, when you're a booker. No, it was the thing. It was the thing at the time where we wanted Brooksy to be a heel, but the fact is Brooksy's lovable. And it's hard to get Brooksy to be hated. So why not put someone with him that could be a heat magnet? And at the time, Cree thought that I could do that. And I had confidence that I could probably do that if I got the chance to be that arsehole. Because I've never done that before. Like on shows, when I was at Riot City Wrestling as a commentator, as a ring announcer, I was always the good guy. I was the when Josh Armour, who taught me commentary and all of that sort of thing, he went into managing, but just didn't like being hated. He just wasn't like that. No, he was such a nice guy that he could not handle people not liking him. It just went against him. Whereas I love shit stirring, so that was a kind of a thing with me. So we gave it a go, and we did this whole thing where I did a big turn as a heel to help Brooksy win the key to the city, which is like a Money in the Bank for Riot City Wrestling, and that's how I fell into managing. So I managed him, and then I managed Chris Basso. We were a group called Team Eastman. We had Adam Pearce for one night. Was in Team Eastman. So yeah, we did all that, and then before
Always making yourself the star of the show. Hey, Team Eastman.
No, I didn't want that. I didn't want that name. Cree wanted that name. I was like, this is not, because my whole thing is that it's not about me. It's about the guy. Like my job as a manager is to enhance guys that I work with. That's why when like we walk out of the curtain, I always let my guy walk out first, because he's the guy that, I don't know if you've noticed, but every time Jake walks out, he walks out first because that's the guy. I'm just the backup. I'm just the brains behind the outfit sort of thing. He's the star. That's the way I think a manager should be. A manager shouldn't walk out first going, I'm the greatest, and look at this guy that's with me who's going to go in the ring and do all the work. That's not what, in my mind, that's not what a manager should be. A manager should be someone to enhance the character of the guy that I'm representing.
And I think you're a great manager, Todd, and I know that you know what you're doing in that role. What do you think is important when it comes to managing? What's the thing that a manager can do that just can't be in a match without a manager?
Cheat. Like help. Basically, like to help the guy. It's not so much cheating, it's knowing when to do it and knowing to not do it too much, not overdo it. Like I always had this thing with Cree where I was like, I shouldn't do anything unless it changes the course of a match somewhat in one way, shape, or the other. Whether it makes us lose or makes us win, or like just helps you like a cutoff or something like that. I shouldn't just do something to do something. I mean, you can do those little choke spots on the ropes and all that sort of stuff in the heat. That's a different thing. But if I'm doing something big, it should be to either help us win or help us lose the match, not just to do something, not to just get my shit in.
And so being in that role, like you've said that doing that managing is all about being a heat magnet and cheating. And you've got, I know, some contentious relationships with fans. They do not like Todd Eastman. But then you come on the pod and you're pushing Australian wrestling every week. So how do you kind of align the Eastman that we see come out at shows and manage Jake and choke people on the ropes versus the Eastman who comes on the pod every week and tells people to go out and enjoy local pro wrestling?
Yeah, it's I think they are two different people. There's Todd, real Todd that you know off air and all that sort of thing. There's Todd Eastman from I think like Eddie from Venom. He described it to me best.
A prominent fan. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. He said to me once, he goes, I love Todd, real name, the person. I really like Todd Eastman on the podcast. I hate Todd Eastman, the manager. So just like the way I think of it is like Mick Foley had three characters. That's basically what it is. It's just the same name. Like Todd on this podcast, I'm closest version to what Todd, real Todd is, because it's like wrestling, Australian wrestling in general is my passion. It's something I love. And being that I knew that I was never going to make it really big in wrestling, I can help other people. I can help, whether it being what I do behind the scenes, whether it being doing here. I know I can help people by getting the word out in any way, shape, or form. Because when we started podcasting, like about this show, nobody was really doing it. It was like Conco. And then DCW did a DCW Variety Hour, I think it was called. They did one, but it was basically just Gino and Mikey J and that taking the piss out of each other. They weren't really promoting shows like we do. And but yeah, that's yeah. And when I go through that curtain, I'm that loud, abrasive, smart ass. Like if I'm laughing, it's because something's happened to somebody or somebody's had a misfortune. That's why I laugh. I don't laugh because I'm funny. I'm just an asshole. It's a different person for me anyway. I feel it's a different person entirely when I walk through a curtain.
Is there a way that you flick that switch? Is there something that you do or something that you turn to become that? Or is there something in you that when you walk through the curtain just makes itself come out?
Yeah, it used to. Yeah, there's nothing I've really done. Like it just happens, if that makes sense. So I remember like we're at Valhalla once, New Valhalla. And Jake and I, right before we walked out the curtain, were arguing about his entrance music because I thought at the time it was shit. This is before the one that he has now. It was like just some random generic. Yeah. Like I'm like, this is the worst. Like as we were walking through the curtain, like this is the worst like entrance music I've ever had, man. Like, he goes, what do you mean? So, it does nothing. No one knows what the hell you are. Walk through the curtain, switch straight away. Like this is the man. It just happened. Something happens when I walk through a curtain where I become that. If I'm in that role, I become that version. Like if I'm doing ring announcing or doing a hosting of the show, that's pretty much podcast Todd Eastman. It's a different story when I manage it. Because as far as I'm concerned, that's like, maybe in my mind, I equate it to, that's my job now. My job is to make sure my guy wins by any means necessary, and I don't care about anyone else. That's my mindset. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. We've mentioned Jake a couple of times, who is, I mean, I don't think there's much argument. He is one of the best in Queensland. Do you think that his kind of level of performance, is that something that is all him, or does having that manager role give him that ability to play the heel in that way?
Look, he is the closest thing to Chris Basso in Queensland. Like, Chris Basso to me is one of the best wrestlers in the country that never really gets talked about as being one of the best wrestlers in the country. He's just, I don't know why. It's because he never really pushed to go internationally or pushed to go nationally either. He didn't really push for bookings in Melbourne or anywhere else. I don't know why, because he just wanted to stay in Riot City and make Riot City as big and as strong as he possibly could. Unbelievable worker. And Jake is very much the same way. Unbelievable worker. Doesn't really want to go interstate, doesn't really want to do any of that. So just wants to make his area as strong as he possibly can to do it. And again, Jake is like Chris, lovable. He's a lovable dude. Like if you know him outside of wrestling, he's just a lovable guy. And it's hard to have people hate him when he's being just that funny larrikin guy. So that's where I come in. That's where I make him that angry, not angry, but I make him that smug asshole guy, because I help him do that. I back him up. We do that selfie gimmick thing that we do, because that's just us being smart asses, adding another face to the trophy cabinet, if you will. And it's like, I've loved working with him, just like I loved working with Chris. It's this very similar dynamic, except for with Chris was very much a mentor type, and I learned a hell of a lot from him. Whereas with Jake, it feels like we're a lot more equal. So yeah, it's basically what that is.
So with that, you said like Chris Basso felt like a bit of a mentor type, and then with Jake, you're on a bit of the same level. Being in the booking role that you're in, there's been some young guys that have come up and that you've been involved in their development. A couple that spring to mind are Xander Sullivan, Sebastian Matters, most prominently recently is Mitch Ryder. Do you feel like you're now maybe in that Chris Basso role for them?
No, because I'm not a wrestler. I'm like, and I make no like airs that I am a wrestler. I'm just a dude that loves wrestling, and I study it a hell of a lot. Like I watch wrestling every day, unfortunately, to my wife. But it's like I study it. So I try and learn from as many people as I can. And like this, like I said in the Ozres article I did that they interviewed us for Wrestle Radio Australia. Basically, when I interview guys like David Storm, Rocky Monero, like Jack Bonza, is for me, it's like doing a seminar every week. Like I learn, I pull something from everyone that like, and I like to try and pass that on, because that's, to me, that's what wrestling is. Like you learn things, and then you try and pass it on to people. You try and like help them in any way you can. If there's a way you can help somebody, to help them. Like I can never help somebody in the mechanics of a move, because I just don't know it. I can tell you that didn't look right, but I could never tell you mechanics of a move. There's been times where I've walked up to Jake and go, can you do something where like there was a move with Jake and Alex Shepard, they're having a match, and Alex's thing was the Rainmaker, and I was like, is there any way you can turn that into a Spanish fly? And he was like, oh well, we could try. And they tried and they worked it out, and then like 2 days later, Okada and Ospreay did it. And I was just like, holy shit, okay. I must think something like that. That's cool. But it's just like with those guys, I'm just there to help them in any way that they need me to help them, like just advice and breaking down like the one thing I will say is I think I'm pretty good at working out the psychology of a match, because that's my thing. I love that shit. So with those guys and the anatomy of an angle, the anatomy of a match, I'm fairly good at working out what that can be. So it's just, if I can help those guys in any way through like just advice, stuff like that, that's what I love. That's the thing I love. I love when I see something that we've talked about, they go out and do it and it works in front of a crowd. That to me is, I love that stuff because I know I'll never be able to do it myself.
That you have, pitched to some of those young guys or booked or anything like that, that you're especially, what's the moment where you can go, I really made something great there by pushing those guys in that direction? Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, there's been like I think the open weight thing that we did with Xander and Seb, because that
Tell us about it.
Well, the whole thing was just like,
that was definitely the thing in my head when I asked the question.
Yeah, I thought it was. I thought this was where you were leading, because originally that was only supposed to be a one-off match. That's supposed to be a one and done, and then I think we got a one and done or two, something like that. But we got an extra show thrown at us, and at the time, the champion Mitch McCarthy couldn't make that show, so we had to have something that was a big main event because it was the last show of the year as well. So I was like, well, why don't we just make an angle out of these two guys, because there's a belt involved. They've got good chemistry in the ring. We could really do something with this. So we did that whole angle where it was just like they did their first match. Then the second match was I think the second match was where he lost the belt, which moved into a 3 Stages of Hell match, which I think was a really, really good match between the two of those guys. I didn't have any input in the match whatsoever. That was just those guys, because I knew they knew what they wanted to do. All I really did is give them the skeleton of what I wanted, and those guys filled it in. And I think it's still up on YouTube, the whole 3-match series to watch. And it's no doubt because there's two guys that hadn't really gotten given a chance before. And to see them thrive the way they did through those 3 matches was that's something I really did enjoy.
Yeah, and I mean, that's one that I personally come back to because I was getting into local wrestling at that time, and that's one of the feuds that really cemented, oh, this is something I love watching, is seeing those young guys really make a series and make it look great. So we've talked about kind of a lot of what you've done in the ring. Let's talk about a little more about what you do behind the mic here. So let's talk about Josh for a minute. Josh being Josh Armour, the former co-host of Wrestle Radio Australia.
I swear to God,
my understanding is he was the driving force behind starting it. Is that right? I'm trying not to, Todd.
Yeah, I know.
But Josh was the driving force behind starting the pod. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, like we talked, like there was a thing back in the day because podcasts weren't really a thing. But I wanted to make one for Riot City, like just a Riot City wrestling podcast. But it was like we tried to do it kayfabe. It didn't really work because like the nature of podcasting is you can't really do stuff kayfabe because everyone who listens to podcasts, they know what the score is. So we sort of like talked about it. And I think he got approached by Wrestle Hustle, they were called. It was a magazine. And they'd already started a podcast, but the guys did one episode. And they're like, oh, well, we talked to Mick Foley in that episode. We've done what we wanted to do. We won't do this anymore. So the guy came to Josh. Yeah, the guy came to Josh and was just like, oh, would you like to try this? And Josh was an audio nerd type of guy. So he loved that shit. He like worked it all out because I wouldn't have the faintest clue on how to do it when it first started. So he'd worked it all out. And he was just like, he was talking to me about it because we talked a lot because we were doing the commentary together at Riot City. And like I go off on chicken salad with my rants. I've always done that. So I just said to him one day, I said, how about I do like a 3-minute segment on there where I just cut a promo on something I don't like at the moment in wrestling. just like those Jim Cornette rants are on Raw, basically that. And it was called Views from the East, and that, like, I still do it now on the show every now and then. When something gets under my skin, I'll do a thing where I talk about it. And they call it Views from the East. That was he named that because he thought it was funny with Eastman and all that shit. But yeah, I did that for the first episode. Then the second episode, he was like, "Oh, I don't really like talking just by myself. Like, I don't have anyone to bounce off." He's like, "Do you want to come on and we'll do it? And then we can talk about like WWE." Because our idea behind it is if we talked about WWE, TNA, because that's what it was back then. It was WWE, TNA, a little bit of Ring of Honor. If we can draw people in, maybe from Australia that listen to, that want to listen to about people talk about WWE and that, and we can go, "Oh, by the way, there's some Australian wrestling here. You should check this out as well." That could work. So we did it, and for a while there, it was really good because, like, we would do our little segment, and then Josh would talk to someone from every state, which must have taken ages for him to work out. Because it'd be like Chris Dalglish up here, who at the time was running Pacific Pro Wrestling. He talked to Ree in Melbourne, who, if anyone knows Melbourne wrestling, they know who Ree is. I can't remember who he talked to in Sydney, and like there was us in Adelaide, and then Tez over in Perth. So he covered the whole, like, what was going on, what shows were going on that weekend, what was happening in the promotions, that whole deal. So he did that for a while, and then it just evolved into us deciding that we were going to do interviews with people instead. Instead of talking about, they were screwed doing the WWE thing. We're not, let's just talk about wrestling, like Australian wrestling. Let's talk to Australian wrestlers, and we'll just interview them. Like, originally it was like a 5-minute interview, 10-minute interview. That was a segment of the show. And then that just sort of started growing to the point where it was just like, we'll talk for 5 minutes and then the rest of the show can be a interview. So that's what the thing is. And then, like, to me, that unlocked like my love of doing, like, I wish that I knew I liked doing this as much, because if I did, I probably would have tried to make it a career, like in radio or something like that. But yeah,
you do have a face for radio, Todd.
Oh, thank you, sir. But yeah, I love podcasting. I love talking about talking about wrestling. I love talking about stuff I love. Like we did a basketball podcast for a while with a couple of mates, and that was fun as well. But it's just not the same as wrestling. Wrestling is my passion. So it's very easy for me to ramble on, as you can tell, about wrestling.
Yeah, and let's really quickly talk about the basketball, because that's kind of become an Eastman staple, is the basketball jerseys, the shoes, the kicks. How much of that is Eastman and how much of that is Todd?
Oh, that's Todd. That was a good excuse for me to buy like a lot of sneakers that my wife getting mad at me for. Oh, but it's for the gimmick, babe. That's why I bought them. Why do you need so many? Because these are after the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. These are Ric Flair ones. Well, why do you need 2 different colors of Ric Flair ones? So it's because if I wear a different colored outfit, that'll go with the blue ones. If I wear the white ones, I can go with most stuff. But yeah, that was just like, we started doing it. And then honestly, the reason I started wearing sneakers is because I used to do the whole, what every generic manager in the world does, wear a suit. And it's basically like wearing skates out there if you're trying to run in business shoes. So I was like, nah, screw that. Like, I'm more a tracksuit guy, like outlandish tracksuits, like sneakers. Like with Cree, it was like I had I still wear it occasionally. You know that dollar bill jacket? I had that full tracksuit. I had flashing sunglasses. I had like the whole gimmick. Our idea was all the gimmicks. Let's use all the gimmicks we can. Just put as much outlandish shit on us as possible and see how that works. So that's basically what happened. It's the sneakers. 100% is A, I love sneakers, and B, it's just easier to work when you can actually grip the ground and not skate around.
Makes sense. So again, I'll try not to make you cry here, but Josh did unfortunately take his own life a little while ago now, and you've continued to do the podcast as a solo operation. partially in memory of him, and as part of that done a lot of promotion of mental health awareness, supporting charities like Beyond Blue and Gotcha for Life, which we'll mention here. If you head on over to Redbubble, any Wrestle Radio Australia merch that you purchase, all the profits from that will go to Beyond Blue and Gotcha for Life, two amazing charities that we support here. We've all dealt with mental health stuff, and that leads me to what I want to ask about is what I think is the most powerful work that's been on the podcast is those mental health episodes that have been there with guys like Nova and the big one that you did. Can you talk to us about what it was like putting that together?
It was surprisingly easy, which is weird because if there's people that actually know me outside, they know I don't like asking people for things a lot. I'm very stubborn that way. I don't like encroaching on someone's like personal sort of thing. I'm very like honestly, half the time, the reason why I don't have a lot of girls on the show is because I don't want to feel like a creep messaging them, asking them to come on the show. I swear to God, there's been times where like, if I want someone like a Jess Troy, I'll message like JT that works for PWA and say, can you please? Because I don't want to just be a random dude sliding into someone's DMs going, you want to come on the podcast? Because I feel creepy doing it, and I don't want to do it because that's not where I'm coming from at all. But like those guys, like Brody Marshall is one of my he's one of my brothers. I've known him since before wrestling. So with him, it was easy for me to ask him, but it was a big thing for him to say yes. Gino is like just a lovely dude. Like behind the scenes, he is a lovely guy, and I knew that he dealt with stuff like that before. So I just said, look, I asked him to come on. I said, I completely understand if you don't want to talk about any of this sort of thing, but I think it could help. And he really loved Josh. He loved Josh, and he loves Josh's dad. So that's a big reason why he did it. I'm starting to, yeah. And Wolf Dog is the same. He used to do commentary, old school wrestler from Adelaide, dealt with the same issues. A lot of people deal with these issues. We just don't talk about them a lot. And I think it was important. Those guys, I respect and I love those guys so much for having the balls to come on and talk about that stuff. Because it's hard. Like, it's not as hard for me anymore to talk about it because I do it so often that it just makes it part of my normal life to talk about if I'm having an issue, if I'm having a down day, if I'm having, like I did a little while ago, I did a Views from the East where I was dealing with some stuff. Half the time, this is my way I deal with things. I talk about it to a microphone and a camera, and it makes me feel better because I've got it off my chest. And a lot of people, I'm not preaching, but a lot of times that's all you need to do is talk about it. And for those guys, like, again, eternally thankful that they came on. And it, like you say, for me, it is my proudest episode that I've ever done. Like, I could talk to 1,000 megastars, 1,000 world champions. It wouldn't equate to what I feel that episode did, because I had people messaging us saying, thank you, I was in a really rough place. And I listened to that show and it helped me out. And it stopped me doing something that I might have regretted, or it led me to reach out to get help, which is, that to me that's so important to just be open, because it's the only way. I always say it in, like, when I lay talking about things makes the troubles not seem as big as what they are, what you think they are in your head. And if you get them out, then a lot of times you're like, it's not that bad. I've talked, like, now I hear it out loud. It's when you hear it echoing around and bouncing around in your head, it becomes 1,000 times worse because it just echoes. If you just get it out there and talk to somebody, or just talk like I do sometimes, talk to a camera, it doesn't seem so bad after that because you got it off your chest. Anyway, I just went and preached for that. But that is, yeah, those guys, I'm eternally grateful for what they did coming on the show.
Absolutely. And just while we're on that topic, let's just remind everyone, you can always call the mental health access line on 1300 MH call. That's 1300 642255. And there's some amazing charities out there like Beyond Blue, Gotcha for Life. If you are feeling those things, talk to someone, get help. There are people here to help. But
there's also,
while we're
there's
talking
also
about,
things too,
you know,
sorry,
that's
there's
obviously...
Also things too, there's also things too, if you don't feel comfortable in talking, there's text lines now. So you can text it off and talk about it that way. If you're not comfortable with like voicing it and you just want to get it off and text it, you can do that now, which is great. I think that's a great thing as well.
That's absolutely excellent. So, you know, do those things, and absolutely deservedly a proud moment. Since that's been, you know, a big tick for the podcast, what other things do you really hope that you can get with Wrestle Radio Australia? What are the things in the future?
Money,
that...
no.
No. We need the sponsorships. Let's sell some ball trimmers, Todd.
Yeah. Honestly, I just want to help Australian wrestling. Like I've never sought sponsorship. To be honest with you, I just pay for this show. Like if I was smarter, I would have done the whole, like everything we make off Redbubble, I'll donate to charity, because I don't care. I'm happy to pay what I pay to run the show, because this is a passion thing. It's something I love. And if I can turn somebody on to Australian wrestling, if I could turn like some people on who then turn other people on to then turn other people on, that's amazing. That's what I think that's from day one. That is what our core objective has been for Wrestle Radio Australia, is to make Australian wrestling, like to help make Australian wrestling better known in Australia.
Yeah, awesome. So I've got a question then, and this is maybe a bit of a personal question, but a couple of months ago now,
I needed the money.
That one time. We started a couple
money.
of months ago the new Wrestle Radio Australia podcast, Making Chicken Salad, where you were so gracious to invite me on to co-host a show with you, where basically I get to shout at you that you're wrong for an hour and a half when we post it. What led you to, you know, thinking that after so long, where it initially Wrestle Radio Australia was a show talking about international wrestling, that it pivoted away from? What made you want to come back to that?
I just like talking about it. And I find that I end up in text change with friends talking about wrestling all the time. I was like, why don't I just do this and record it and just put it out there? I mean, and I also know that I have like controversial opinions, or just opinions that aren't really held by a lot of independent wrestling fans, because I have an old school mentality when it comes to wrestling. I just do. It's just the way I was brought up in the wrestling I love. So I like talking about that, and I like being able to say, look, this was great, but this is what I think that they did wrong, and it could be like, this is what I don't like, and this is why I don't like it. Like on our episodes, you never hear me go, that was shit. And you go, why? And I go, it was just shit. I never do that. Like I always give you a reason why I thought it was a good, you know, and what I think that I would have done differently. And that to me is what wrestling fandom's about. Like everybody that's a wrestling fan is an armchair booker or a fantasy booker in their head. And everybody thinks that they know the proper way it could have been done. But we're not the ones with the toy box. So, but I love talking wrestling, and I like talking wrestling with people that have different views. I like a healthy debate when it doesn't devolve into people going, oh, well, you're just an E-drone or a Vincel or all that. That's bullshit. That to me tells me that you don't actually have an argument. You don't have a point of view, and so you just want to dismiss it by calling someone names. Like if you have a point of view, make your point of view. Don't, like the worst thing. Like there's one podcast I listen to, and if these guys, it's Wrestle Roast. I've had one of the Wrestle Roast guys on the show. We'll talk. One of the guys there is a diehard AEW fan, like just a diehard, like probably has a Tony Khan tattoo somewhere. Anytime like somebody disagrees with something that happened or says this was terrible, he just goes, "Oh, shut up, you're dumb. It was amazing." Not anything that annoys me. I would rather have like debates with people. I'd rather have debates with people where they can put across their side. And it's one of the reasons why I asked you to come on, because when we talked like at shows and stuff, you always came back with a point of view, which is that, and that to me is great. I like people with differing point of views. Like I don't like people just go, no, yeah, you're right, if they don't believe it. Like if you believe I'm wrong, or if you have a different way, tell me, because maybe that's like something I didn't recognize, I didn't realize, and go, yeah, you're right. Or like we did on our episode we just filmed, we agreed to disagree about something, because that's okay too. You're allowed to do that. Wrestling's flavors of ice cream. Sometimes I don't like the flavor that you like, and that's cool.
Yeah, so we've talked about Todd the manager. We've talked about Todd the podcaster. One of the things that we've touched a little bit less is kind of Todd the booker. Now, I don't want to get too far into that stuff because, we don't want to go too behind the scenes. But what I want to know is, now that, we're talking more about the Australian wrestling scene, as a booker, what is a match that you would really love to see, regardless of borders, regardless of companies and where people are? Are there one or two matches that you think would just be incredible that you'd love to see?
Yeah, there is. I won't tell you what they are, but no, there is. Like, there's so many. That's the thing about Australian wrestling, is that there is so many good potential matches out there that can be had. It's just a matter of like having the people that want to put them together. They want to put, like, I'd put Jessica Tribe against anybody just to watch it. I want to watch her and AJ Istria again. Like I saw it at Deathmatch Down Under. I'd like to see him in a longer match to see what they could do. Stuff like that. I'd like to see Jake and Chris Basso. That's for me personally, because
damn, that'd be a great match.
Yeah, but there's something because they're both thing. Like having Brooksy come up to work, Jake, was a thing where like, wow, it's like my past and my present just smashing into each other. That's amazing. But that's like stuff like that. And there's so many guys around the country that could put on good matches that you could see. Like I'd like to see Bro Day get out there more around the country, because they're a tag team that people don't talk about, but they're really good. And they just need that push. And it's hard being where they live for them to get that push. So there's hundreds of matches. There's just a matter of looking at people, and then like if I'm condensing it down to like a roster, just looking at a roster and going, oh, that guy would work really well with this guy. Let's try this. And stuff like that. It's just things. It's just, yeah. It's seeing that and going, I'd like to see that. And hopefully the fans would like to see. More importantly, what would the fans like to see?
That's a great answer. So, speaking of the fans, one last question for you. As a podcaster or as a manager or as a booker, is there something that you think people don't know about what you do that you would really like them to understand about what you do?
Just that it's not as easy as what everyone thinks it might be, because it's so not. It's so not. It's so not as easy. Because the thing, like, I could, in my mind, have the best idea in the world that I think these two guys would work so well together. We'll do this massive angle, and this guy will do this, and this guy will do that, and then they'll come and it'll like culminate in this massive match. It'll be amazing. And those two, you go up to them and go, you explain it all, and they go, I don't really like that, I'm not really into it. Like the hardest thing for a booker is to make it so, well, not make it so, but put your ideas across in a way that makes those people get enthused about doing it. Because if you don't like what you're doing, you're never going to put 100% into it. It's just as simple as that. You'll try, and I know there are guys out there that will put as much as they possibly can, but if their heart's not into it, you can tell. And that's one thing with going back with Xander and Sebastian. At the start, they weren't all that excited about it until I sold them on the whole. This is what we're going to do, and this is why we're going to do it, and this is why. Because originally Xander didn't want to lose the title in the second match. And I was like, well, if you do this, this gives you you have to come back to win it. And what better way to do that than a best of three, like the 2 out of 3 falls match, where you've gone through hell and then you've come out on top. You've really earned that. You come out of that, and then you are a solidified champion. Like, people have seen you sweat, bleed, pay the price, the whole Ric Flair deal for that championship. And if anything, this is what will make that championship something, because you guys have been willing to do what you did in that ring to win that belt. And that's when it sold them. And as soon as it sold them and their hearts were in it, they just took that and ran. And that's like I said, it's one of my proudest moments, because I could see them taking it on as their own and just breathing life into it, and to making it something that people that know what the deal is. Like, everyone that goes to wrestling knows what the deal is. And for those 20 minutes during those matches, they forget. And they think, holy shit, they're going to kill each other for this title. That's what a wrestler's job is. And that's what a booker's job is, to make that happen. If you know what I mean, to give them the blueprint, to build to make the picture, to make the sculpture, to make the art form. If I can give you a blueprint, but I don't know how to build it, I can't build it. You guys have to go out there and flesh it out. And when they do that and do it well, like those two did, that's what the job is.
Fantastic. Well, Todd, thank you so much for letting me take control away from you for this episode. It's been absolutely awesome to hear. You know, we get to hear you talk about all sorts of stuff, but it's very rare that we get to hear you talk about yourself and what you do behind the scenes and in wrestling. So thank you so much for the opportunity to let us get to hear your side of the story.
No, man, like I've said it before on the show to you, like on Chicken Salad to you, but thank you for coming on board on the show to help out with chicken, to come on and do Chicken Salad. And yeah, you've come along in so many like leaps and bounds since we started, that it's really nice to see. It's really good to see your growth over the
Thanks, podcast dad.
Fuck off. Great. That's another one.
Yeah, there's a
podcast dad.
There you go.
But no,
add the kids to your collection.
Yeah. But honestly, we've only been doing it for 10 episodes, so 20 weeks. And your growth over that period of hosting is great. It's good. It's great to see you do it to the point where you go out there and do the Wide Bay show as a ring announcer, and you were probably pretty comfortable in doing it because you'd done.
I'm glad it looked like I was comfortable. I was shitting bricks.
But you know what I mean? It's just, yeah, gets you the reps.
No, and that's it. I really appreciate it, Todd. You are, you don't. I think sometimes you don't get enough credit for all the great work you do here on Wrestle Radio Australia. So thank you so much for everything, for me personally, and on behalf of all the listeners. So with that, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to Wrestle Radio Australia. Well, we don't really need to do as much of that on here, but it's free. Do it on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts from. But more importantly, please give us a rating, give us a review, hit that 5-star button, because you've just heard Todd say that what he really, really wants out of this is to get the word out and convince people about Australian wrestling. And giving those ratings and reviews really helps us get into more ears and helps us spread that message. So if you can do that, it means a lot. Drop by the social media. That's Wrestle Radio AU on Twitter and Instagram, and it's Wrestle Radio Australia on Facebook. And you can communicate with us there. Let us know what you want to see. Let us know who you want to hear from, what kind of stories you want to hear. Head on over to Redbubble, search for Wrestle Radio Australia. As mentioned earlier, All of the profits from those products go towards Beyond Blue and Gotcha for Life, two amazing charities supporting mental health, specifically men's mental health in Australia. They do excellent work. And another reminder that if you are feeling down, talk to someone. It's important. You deserve help. Anything else you'd like to add, Todd?
Just that Australian wrestling is fucking amazing. Go out there and
It's so good.
Go out and see a local show. Really, just give it. If you watch wrestling, if you watch AEW, if you watch WWE, go out and watch some local. There is not. I can't describe to you the difference in seeing it live as to just watching it on TV. It's a completely different animal, and like I loved wrestling. I loved wrestling after I actually went and saw it live, like local Australian wrestling. When I went, my first show I went to was, I think it was Chris Basso against Voodoo, and Rocky Monero was on the show, and Brendan Vink, who's now what's his name in Hudson? No, Hudson. What's his name in Duke Hudson? There you go, Duke Hudson is on the show. Jonah Rock was on that show. Like that opened my eyes to a world of wrestling where I don't think I missed a show after we went to see that first show. Like Brody Marshall and I went to every show after that. Go out and support Australian wrestling because these guys are amazing. The fact that you're seeing so many of them getting signed and going overseas should tell you that. So please go out there and support them because it's a passion project for all of us.
Awesome. So thank you so much for listening. On behalf of Todd Eastman, I've been Lachlan Albert. Have a good one.
Too sweet, put your fangs up. Too sweet, pour another cup. Let's be busy 23.